Podcast. I am on location with Nancy Marlowe. How are you?
Marco.
Why do I have it as...
That's okay.
I'm-
Marco, Polo.
We are on location at Nancy Markow's house. Thank you so very much for having me in your home.
Absolutely.
But it's also your business too.
Yes, it is.
I see behind me we have a group set up for later today.
It's the Living Intentionally Circle.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely. So we connected as a referral from somebody else, and I reached out because you're much more immersed into the Enneagram world than I am, and I wanted to grab your expertise on that because I'm so passionate about it. I've seen so much growth from it. So how did you discover it yourself?
I found the Enneagram actually as a parenting tool. So my daughters were young. One was just starting middle school. The other one was getting out of middle school. And life was kind of falling apart. And so I was introduced to it. It was magical as a parenting tool. Everything I thought I was doing as a great parent was actually a really bad parent. And I have a long story on that, but we can save that for another time. And then I found it to be so immensely helpful, I started studying. And that was in 1994.
Right, so it's 23, 25 years now of true immersion. So what was in the beginning that you saw so transformational that made you stick with it?
Well, a good example is I have a daughter that's an 8. And she, I have two, one's an 8, one's a 9.
Mm-hmm.
And my 8 daughter was coming home. She was very studious. And she was coming home from middle school, which is a challenging time for kids, I think, and all human beings.
Too, yeah.
And she was holding it in because she was a very good student, but she was looking at all the things, the stupidity, the cliquish, the immaturity. She was much more mature. And she would get home and she would explode. And she would be very intense. And I would say to her, thinking I was a good mother, go to your room. Until you calm down, go to your room. What I learned through the Enneagram was that what she was feeling was betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
That she had come in with all this intensity that had to come out and be shared, and I was betraying her. I was abandoning her, but the word for the 8 is betrayal. My 9 daughter was sneaking in during this chaos that was happening because she wouldn't go to her room and there would be yelling. And I always thought of her as the easy one, but I was kind of getting worried because she was always kind of in her room with the door shut. And I would burst into her room, open the door, and sit on her bed and thinking I'm a good mom and say, tell me about your day. Tell me what's going on. And what I learned through the Enneagram is that the absolute wrong thing to do, that the 9 needs time to process through. She had been merging all day with her classmates and her friends, and the 9 needs a time to decompress.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really hard. My 8 daughter was easier. My teacher taught me to touch her, to help her take it down. I want to listen to you. I want to connect with you. You're important to me. I respect what you have to say. And it was transformational, just like that. My other daughter, I had to sit outside of the room. And as a 2 mom, that felt like disconnection. That felt extremely unsafe and scary, but I listened. And I remember sitting on the floor with my hand over my mouth so she couldn't hear me breathing and just crying, going, please let this work. Please let this be the answer. And it took literally weeks, like maybe 2 months. And then she started coming out. And then she started inviting me in.
Mm-hmm.
But just learning that. And that is, I think that those examples really apply in the focus of your podcast on relationship, because we can think we're doing something so incredibly good. You know, I was trying to connect and thinking, you know, I only am going to connect with you when you calm down, but to understand how we're different. Mm-hmm. And your intensity doesn't mean that you don't want to connect. Mm-hmm. And my yearning can be trigger to, you know, as a 2 and an 8
Yeah, the dynamic there is really fun. My daughter's a 9 also, and she comes to me once and she says, "Dad, I think we butt heads because we're so different." And I said, "No, Maddie, we butt heads because we're so much alike."
Exactly.
And we both have that movement to anger very quickly as the gut-centered 8, 9, and 1. And just understanding that is why I turn to anger and feeling so much not resentment, but like that betrayal. Even the little things are really big for a challenger.
Right. We all have our sensitivities, and our sensitivities we blow out of proportion.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything becomes a betrayal, and for every type that is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Different triggers, right?
Yeah.
So you learned that as a parent, and you found it to be a useful tool, but it translates to other areas too. So who do you find comes to you for help? And that's funny, comes to you for help. And what's an experience like for them when they do reach out to you about personal growth and self-awareness through the Enneagram?
All types of people come, all genders, all expressions, races, ages. I've had students as young as 11 and as old as 84. And what I set forth as an intention is people come to me when they're ready to see themselves, to fall in love with themselves, and to find the pathway to be the best that they can be, so that they move away from resistance, which causes suffering, and they come into themselves. They come into loving themselves. The name of my umbrella that I work under is Connecting You with Yourself, such a two kind of thing, title. But I share with people through Enneagram. Tomorrow night, the space will be an Enneagram discussion group. Tonight, it's a Living Intentionally group. But yet last night, it was a workshop on tapping into innate wisdom. So the people come to learn tools, to explore together, to have experiences, and they're people who are ready to grow.
Mm-hmm. I love that you use the word path, because for me, the Enneagram is a roadmap to my life. I understand my past on the road that I've traveled, that winding road that I've traveled up until now. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, well, this explains why I chose this here, that there, and so forth. And then it becomes a roadmap for my future as well. Of like, why did women with a history of trauma gravitate to me in my personal training business? Because when I'm at, well, not only that, but like when I'm at my best, I root for the underdog. Mm-hmm. I champion for the little guy. Absolutely.
And I describe the type 8, even though the heart types and the 3 is the center of the heart, the 8, an evolved self-aware 8, I believe, has the biggest heart, because you are the protectors, mm-hmm. you are the leaders, and that is the essence of the 8. And you 8s accept everyone if they just show up honestly.
That's right. Yeah. I think that's a good indication as to why the foundational principle is authenticity for the podcast, because it envelops integrity, it envelops transparency and vulnerability, which I had to learn was a strength and not a weakness. Mm-hmm. That was probably the second hardest thing I had to learn when I started down my roadmap or my path. Mm-hmm. The number one thing I had to learn that was hardest for me was to let go.
Mm-hmm. Because control is the tendency
it's my default,
of the personality. Mm-hmm. Well,
mm-hmm.
it is both. Everything in the Enneagram, everything, I truly believe, is both a gift and a curse. And so the control, when it is used from your highest way of being, is how you're a leader. Mm-hmm. And when you're not at your highest way of being, it's how you're an asshole.
Yeah, that's true. The intensity. So let's use that as an example, and then we'll move on to the helper, because we've just started a series on the helper, and that's a great conversation to have. So, for example, in my personal training business, I was championing for the little guy, which was that woman who needed to feel empowered by gaining strength, and I could use my intensity in that environment appropriately because I was the coach. I was the person who was given permission to have control of exercise selection, how much weight, what time, when, where, and that was me in my great space.
In your leadership role.
And then I didn't find the Enneagram until a year after that movement was occurring. So I had built my business in somebody else's studio, renting space from them, and it was easy for me. Like, I didn't have to manage the 4 walls and a ceiling. I didn't have to pay the electric bill. I didn't have to fix the leaky roof. I could just focus on my one lane of expertise.
Right.
And it was great. And had I had the Enneagram as a roadmap, I would have leaned into the clientele that was gravitating to me naturally. And that's the leader of the community. When I opened my own studio, I had too much on my plate, and then I went to areas of stress, and I went to overwhelm, and why are my clients leaving me? And then I found betrayal, and thank God I found the Enneagram at that time so that I knew why I was going through what I was going through.
Yeah. And you probably had fallen down into the 5. And
Investigator.
And lost your voice and your power.
I did. I definitely lost my voice. And the Enneagram is sending off signal flares. It's my roadmap to get back on track. And it's almost like calling me back to my areas of strength with literal signal flares.
Yeah, the Enneagram is such a fabulous map. And what's fun is one of my journeys is to point 8.
That's right.
And it's not too, I like to say point rather than personality or type, because it's the point in the wisdom that holds my growth or not. So as an 8, you would have pathways to your wings, like your daughter and the types and the 0.7, and then you'd go 0.2 or 0.5. As a 0.2, I will travel to 1 and 3. Those are my wings. And I have the philosophy that while it's important to identify which one you're more aware of, it's most important to use both wings, because you need both wings to fly. You can't fly with just one wing.
It's a good analogy for it.
Yeah, I have a lot of them. I jump around when I teach. And then
if you guys aren't watching this on YouTube, please do so, because it just goes so much further.
And then I overlay the Enneagram onto our body. So I'll start there. So I say your core is your essential quality. That's where your virtue is. It's your heart space. It's the center. It's your trunk of your body. And then you have your arms, which are the wings, what reaches out to either type. And then you have your legs, which are those pathways. So my pathway is to 8 and to 4. And then I add in your head, because that's the only part we haven't talked about, holds the choices of either the personality, which is learned in the left side of the brain, very simple brain science, not totally accurate, but good for this purpose. And then your virtue, or the wisdom pathway, the map, is provided in the creative part of the brain. So always inviting you into curiosity. Then I add on to that, you've got to understand the 9 levels of
Optimal
development.
health, yeah, definitely.
That Rizzo Hudson diagram, to me, is one of the most important things to understand, because that helps people to understand who are learning the Enneagram, that when people are sharing descriptors, they're usually capturing the average level. And it doesn't mean you want to identify with that, but you really need to understand the full spectrum of each of the types, and then each of these points that we lean into, that we can draw from. So I can lean into a very average one, and I can take my 2, pride, which is the way I get tripped, the way I fall out of being beautiful and wonderful, and I can add judgment and criticism on it.
With the 1.
And it can make me soar downward.
Yeah.
And I can do the same at 3. I can go into arrogance, I can go into self-deceit and denial, and go downwards. What I want to do is reach for the highest qualities. And then I know you wanted to talk about the points of integration and disintegration. And those words now in the teaching, the teaching has evolved. Really, the Enneagram personalities, Claudio Naranjo, who just passed away, he was the person who put this science together. It was less than 40 years ago that he did that. It really is an evolving science. And in the evolution, the teachers who have used it for a long time have noticed that we can integrate or disintegrate, as I just described, at both our wings and both our points. Now, what is more common is we have one point that when we're punched, will go to the low side. And so for the 2, when the 2 feels punched, when it feels squeezed, when I feel like you aren't seeing me, you don't understand me, you're misinterpreting me, I can go easily in a reactive way to the low 8. And I, 8s get wrongly labeled as being like the meanest type because you've dated some 2s. I wonder if you've seen this, but 2s punched and pinched, we fully go into rage. We can become crazy.
Yeah, the unhealthy version of myself, and that's a hard reflection to see.
Yeah, yeah. But I often say that to 8s. I go, you really have to understand the 2 can go there in the low, but the 2 also has the choices of an average 8 or the evolved point 8 wisdom, which is egoless truth. You love truth. You're trying to flesh out the truth
every single day.
And the key is to get your ego out of your definition of truth. So for me, as I move to point 8, I am seeking to get out of my story, because as a heart type who also moves to the 4, I can make up some pretty big stories that are seated in shame, and they look like blame, victim, and defense. And all types can have blame, victim, and defense stories, but I move to the high 8 to get decisive, to have strength, and to get out of my story. From there, I can move to the growth point or the integrating point at point 4, or not, because I can go back to my story and be a victim, because 4s can do that drama, and or I could go to the high 4 and realize myself and create equanimity, which is emotional balance. Okay, I have a great story. If you don't mind, I'll tell you.
Yeah, that was a lot of information. So I hope that people listening could digest. And I just want to put it in perspective, because we talk about the challenger a lot. That's, of course, my perspective. So when we talk about wings, I tend to relate more to the enthusiast who sits next to me as the 7. So I'm an 8-wing 7, and I'm enthusiastic about challenging people. And when I was talking to the point of becoming my best version of myself, of actually championing for the little guy, that's me being the high part of 2, of just really leaning into the greatness that I can be.
And I would invite you into thinking about the high aspects of 9.
Because
it's also you using your 9 wing in a very healthy way. So the high 9 is wisdom. The high 9 is seeing the bigger picture, getting out of your ego truth. It's how you find vulnerability. The high 9. So the 8 is all about action. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to get that square peg in that round hole. Watch me. And the 9...
I'm like the Kool-Aid man that goes through the wall. And,
yeah.
All right, guys, I'm here.
And here's your daughter here. The 9 is like...
Husa. Yeah. So I do need to learn how to let go. That was one of the biggest life lessons that I had to learn, is let go of control of Madison's existence, so that she can show up and be seen. And when I tell myself stories, because you were about to go talk about the stories that you tell, I make up a lot of stuff too. And
all types do.
It's a self-deceit of that truth that I actually seek out.
Yes, all types fall into blame, victim, and defense stories.
So when we're talking about the helper, I love to use the common words. The point 2 is great to refer to, but the helper is a great thing to remember for a beginner. Somebody just being introduced. It's like, oh well, yeah, I do like to help people. Maybe that's me. And
can I tell you why that I understand, but the why that doesn't resonate with me, because I as I've dived into the wisdom, the helper is more of the average. So helper for type 2, why we're helping is not for the healthiest reason. We are giving to
receive,
get.
yeah.
And so I like the word responder, because when I'm responding, I have no fixation. I am not giving to get anything. I am altruistically responding from my full heart to the need that is shared with me. So I'm not seeking a helper.
Because they're very perceptive of the need, and they jump in beforehand.
Yes.
When they're average or below average.
As a 2, we have both the gift and the curse of noticing need, and I have to put in perceived need, because sometimes the person doesn't have the need at all, but we fall into pride, and we fall into flattery, and we fall into I'm gonna give you what I perceive you're needing, so that you will love me, so that I can feel whole. But from that level of health, I will never feel whole. I can never help you enough, Dave, for me to feel
That's
good.
correct. Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you an example. I don't talk about my personal life much on the podcast, but this is a prime example of my relationship with a 2 in the past. I was a personal trainer building my own business. I had dabbled around in my own website, DaveGlaserPersonalTraining.com, way too long. So when I started dating this helper, she said, I'm going to build you a new website. Well, I never asked for the new website, and it became a point of resentment, which is what we're talking about right now, is like perceived need.
Perceived need.
I didn't need a website. And I was getting caught up in things like the technology side of business. As a personal trainer, we don't need a website. It's a perceived need, even in our businesses.
And it creates a dynamic where you're both falling into resentment. So the 2 is, Dave, I'm doing all this for you.
Why don't you love me?
Not able to see that you are giving, I am sure, as a type 8, very direct and decisive. Hey, I didn't ask for that. I don't know if I really need this. And that's a perfect example of why I don't like the descriptor, the helper. Because again, and this is very common throughout all the Enneagram books, is they will use that average level of health, challenger for the 8. Is that you at your highest way of being? No. I like word protector for the 8, because it's a little bit healthier.
So I do love the new mindset that you're bringing to the table, and why I don't necessarily bring in the highest self first.
It's because people don't recognize it.
Well, and we don't find the Enneagram when we're at our highest self. We might actually find it when we're average or below average, because we're needing some kind of an answer for our life.
That is a very common thinking, and there are these crazy people out there like myself who are teaching it from the higher. And what I recognize in my own experience over the years is there are people who need the average, and so then I can always come down.
So it's like making a high ticket item sale on rungs of the ladder. You don't start with the $10 item. You start with the $1,800 item, and then you work your way down. Okay.
What I'm working on is to see. I don't teach the Enneagram. I believe the Enneagram is innate within every human being. And if I'm talking about it, my hope is that I'm scratching you enough that you start to remember, oh, I am this wonderful being. And not from a place of arrogance, not from a place of narcissism. I'm talking about from a soul place that is you remembering who you're supposed to show up as.
Even if you've never seen it before.
Even if you've never
Yeah.
seen it before. I find the Enneagram, I teach yoga, that I weave the Enneagram, it's found in all the yoga teachings. I have studied energy work and the chakras. I see the same truth that is in the Enneagram, in the chakra teachings. You see it in astrology, you see it in meditation, you see it in Buddhism, you see it everywhere. So that's where I come up with, you know what? I know that somewhere inside of you, you have capacity. Unless you're really deep in mental health issues, and that I'm serious. Like I always, when I do the 9 levels of development, if you're 7 or 7, 8, or 9, 7, you can be in my class. But if you're in 8 or 9, it's not an appropriate place. You need help to find yourself. But if you're 7 and above, I think somewhere in your psyche, you are still connected to point 8, truth.
Yep.
And that's, I love using the Enneagram outside of the typology, and how I teach it in my classes and in the book that I've created is you start with the ancient teachings, no typology, but the point wisdom to understand. And we start with point 8. Point 8 is first chakra. It is
we like to be
I
first
am.
too.
Yeah, you are. And it's that intensity, it's that energy, but to use that as a journey, a meditation. And when you understand that, then understanding the types, I think, comes a little bit easier. So I do prep my students. I don't start just with the typology. I do start with the ancient wisdom and the practice of the pause, which is so important for that first 8 and the intensity of the first chakra, because your pathway is surrender, vulnerability. But Dave, that's just not for you. That's for every single person. We all benefit by a pause, a breath.
Just breathe.
And to notice, what the hell am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing?
And I love it. Just the pause to what am I thinking? Who am I being right now? And we kind of misdirected there just a little bit as I was telling the story about the website. And we were talking about resentment as the relationship between a 2 and an 8. But this is more about the 2. The 2 feeling that need to help, that perceived need to help. And what is
From lack.
Lack, absolutely. Lack of that feeling of love, right?
Yeah, because the 2 comes in, each type comes in with an innate sensitivity that is, again, both the gift and the curse, because the gift part is it makes way for the pathway of the 2. We all have our unique journey. And so the 2's journey is to remember that they are love. But the 2 comes in with the sensitivity, the innate sensitivity of I am simply not lovable. And so I must do for you, I must give to you in order to get love. But like I said, it's a bottomless pit on that level of behavior. You'll never get enough.
No fulfillment whatsoever.
Never. And what happens is the 2 then falls into low 1 of resentment, low 8 of rage, low 3 of arrogance, and low 4 of drama. And I'm sure you've known some lovely 2s who have exhibited those very frustrating for everyone else behaviors, patterns of being.
And what I learned over the last 2 years or so since that relationship ended is that we do gravitate to each other. The 2 and the 8 are a good combination. When we were talking before we hit record that they're a power couple. And I had to remind myself over and over again that not every 2 is the same.
Well, it depends on those 9 levels of health, because they're a power couple when they're up here. They're can be supportive to each other when they're at average, and they're literally destructive to each other
when they're on the
when
low
they're
end.
on the low end.
And through a long-term relationship, you're going to see a lot of different locations on that
Yeah.
9 levels of health.
And I just want to say, the 9 levels of development are variable. No one, and if somebody tells you, I'm an evolved 2, they're
temporarily, for a time being.
It's bull. I mean, they're that just claiming that. I mean, we're always varying.
Pride, right?
We're human. We're
Yeah.
gonna be tired. We're gonna have a bad day. We're gonna be female and have that time of month.
Okay.
We're gonna have hormones. We're gonna have things that happen that cause us to vary. What we want to do is not vary down here.
For too long.
We want to try not to even do it, but we're going to be variable. We want our variables to be shorter and higher.
Yeah. And that's a great way to look at it, because it's very fluid, both
Very
up and
fluid.
down and around
And
too.
around.
So I am always reminded of this Adam Sandler movie where it's like cyclical, up, down, and around. They're talking about a
Yes.
merry-go-round.
Yes.
But in this, we're taking
It
this
is like
very,
a merry-go-round.
yeah, we're taking this very seriously. I'll have to find that clip. It's so funny. We're taking this very, very seriously because the self-awareness piece for both an 8 and a 2 is very important to remind yourself of in a long-term relationship.
Yes.
Because you have your 2. Hopefully you guys are seeing this on YouTube. You have a 2 and an 8. They're both individuals. And then when they're in a relationship, they're kind of crossing over each other as 2 circles kind of overlap. And that sweet spot in the middle is what you share. But the 2, in my experience and my investigation, which is funny because it's the 5, they sometimes don't remember that right away. That
Not at an average level.
That's right. So
They're
they want this circle to overlap even more, and they forget their individuality, which I'm sure that every single number or point on the Enneagram can do. But I've seen the 2 give up self so much more.
Absolutely. And it's so at an average level. And when I first came into the Enneagram, that was a real transitional point for me. And
It's like
just
the light
saying-
switch going
just
off in your
saying,
brain.
you know, one of my teachers said, "Who are you?" And you can't answer with your name, your age, your gender,
Or your
your
job.
work,
Yeah.
your job, your degree, your interest, your marital status, your parenting status. I mean, the list went on. And I remember just really falling apart. And that was a big journey to say, who am I? Who am I?
Yeah.
And I came up with answers for who I was. I started with, I'm a seeker of who I am.
At that time, yeah, absolutely.
You know,
I would say that I was a seeker, and I've spent a lot of time in 5, you know?
Yeah. And in the harmony, just for fun, just again for the journey of healthy 2-8 couple, in the do you know David Daniels' work, The Harmony?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so it's an advanced way of teaching, and each type gets a center. So at the beginning, you have the body, you're the 8, you're in that center. You have a heart connection at the 2, and your head type or point is the 5. But as a 2, I have 2 points in the body and 3 points in the heart. I have no connection to the head center.
Yeah. So they forget.
And it's purposeful. It's not that 2s don't think. That
Not
is
at
a
all,
big.
'cause they are
I mean, people
incredibly
still say
smart,
that.
yeah.
People go, "Oh, I'm as a 2, I don't think." I'm like, no, that's not true. In fact, 2s are thinking all the time. Unfortunately, an average 2 is always thinking in what does Dave think of me, and there lies that journey, and they forget themselves. They're not anybody except what Dave thinks, you know, so they're giving their power away. But in the harmony, once we master our wings and our pathways, the next growth way to use the Enneagram is each type gets a triangle. And so the triangle is your triangle. I move in and I walk the same pathway as you, 8-2-5, 8-2-5. And it's not from a wing or, it's not the reactive, it's a different, it is a center. It's activating three centers of intelligence. So to have trust and faith, to have unconditional love, and to feel oneness and communion, not from, that's what you were demonstrating. So it's enabling that overlap in the center without losing oneself or consuming the other person.
Yeah, and that's a foundational principle of what we encourage on the BBR podcast is individuality plus the grace and the beauty and the freedom that comes from just that slight overlap in the middle. And what can be included in there is family, adventures, experiences, cuisine, core values.
Sex, love, and rock and
there
roll.
you go. Absolutely. I can't believe I didn't touch on those. So let's talk about love. Their main motivation is to get love in return, and that's why they give.
On an average
On an
level,
average.
yes.
And when we
to fill
are,
the void,
yeah, that's
to
right.
fill the void.
I have to remember that part because I love to combine love languages with the Enneagram because if you receive love in gifts and your partner expresses love in physical touch, well then that's going to make a 2 even emptier, like their love bank.
Right, and this
their
is
love bank doesn't fill up
me
at
and
all.
my first marriage, my first husband. I'm on my second husband, and we have similar love languages. And love language is so important to understand because
especially for
really I think it's for all types really, but for a 2, because our wound or our sensitivity or our distorted belief is that we're unlovable. If we're not getting love in the way that we perceive love is to be gotten, it does accentuate the emptiness. And my ex-husband, during our divorce, we read the 5 languages of love. And the Enneagram, I have to say the Enneagram was amazingly supportive for us to have an amicable divorce, for us to maintain responsibility for each of our parts and to not blame or fall into victim or argue in defense, and to just agree to disagree and to be healthy, to take our circles and go, we got to get our circles healthy. But his was his was acts of service.
Okay.
And
you receive love how?
And touch and words of affirmation, which makes sense because this is a good thing for the 2. The way a 2 feels loved across the board, and it can be in the way of gifts or acts of service, but this is really important to know. If you're going to fall in love with a 2, our juice
It's words of affirmation.
is appreciation. So words, it can be gifts of affirmation. It can come in the 5 languages of love, but we have to get from you. And I taught when my husband now, Paul, and I were dating, I gave him the Enneagram. I showed him and I said, I just want you to know when things get tough, the way to get my attention and get me back to healthy is this juice. His is that he has value. And mine is that he's appreciating
Is he a
me.
3?
He's a 3.
Okay, yeah, you said value.
Yeah.
We're gonna touch on the 3 in our next 5-week series, and we could absolutely go on forever about the 2. And I'm so glad that we got to combine the love languages and the Enneagram together because
it's so important.
There is such a thing as taking too many personality assessments, and
Absolutely.
but the combination of the great things of all that we can learn about ourselves. The self-awareness that I've discovered in the Enneagram is my center. And I can add in other things like Myers-Briggs, and I can add in love languages.
Absolutely.
And I can add in just common sense too, or going to see my counselor.
All
of the above.
They all support understanding and identity. And that's important. That's an important part of the step. My passion is to say, don't stop at identity. Go deeper into understanding, why do I do what I do, and what are my choices? And that's what the Enneagram gives us. The map is a map of choices. It's a map of understanding. I have these 9 levels of patterns that I can act at. And then my lover or my friend or my mother or my brother
Coworker.
also, my coworker also has these 9 levels. So instead of making assumptions about them, going into judgment, criticism, which is what my pattern would do, but I think all types do it in one way or another. But to use the Enneagram as a veil of compassion. And then
And grace,
how
yeah,
can
absolutely.
I give, and I love sharing the juice part, because every type has their juice. And if you can talk with that, it's sort of too in a way that it's manipulative, and I'm gonna own that. But it's so helpful. I know, like if my husband and I get in a riff, I guarantee you every single time, if I can get out of my personality, if I can pause, if I can breathe, we are always arguing about some level of shame. So we're both in shame, and we both just want to be loved. So I will say, I'm so pissed at you, and bottom line, I really love you. And guess what? He's gonna come down and he's gonna say that to me. And I think that's true for all the types, but it's especially true for the heart types, the 2, 3, and 4. It's our juice, where yours is a different juice.
Yeah, it's totally different.
And the head types are totally different too. So I know you were trying to wrap it up.
Definitely. Like, we could go on for years and years and years and years because it's just so fascinating to come to a realization that we don't know we don't know ourselves as well as we thought we did.
Right.
And I compare it to searching for my car keys in a dark room, and then when I found the Enneagram as the light switch that went on, and I could immediately find my keys. And then I saw the love seat there, and then I saw my TV, and then I saw my dog, and then I saw all these other bright, beautiful things in the room that I was searching for in the dark. And that's what the Enneagram did for me.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you so much for your time, because I'm fascinated by the 2. I absolutely love a good 2. I love a bad 2 too. You know, like, they're all just.
We have big hearts.
And that's, people gravitate to that. And I love the energy, the attraction of a 2. Like,
Our energy. People will just come up to 2s anywhere and tell them their story. There is an energy factor too.
And there's a lot of empathy there too, on average or high level.
There is.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy.
You're
What do you say?
welcome.
What do you say we follow up and we do another one of these?
I'd love to.
On another couple of types that I'm fascinated by. I love the 3. I do.
I love a 3.
As a personal trainer, who would you rather have as a personal training client than a 3?
Yeah.
And then you get to reward them with that value, and like, you did that perfectly.
And,
let's do it again,
and
4 more times.
They're gonna be the best for you.
I know, right? Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Anything you want to leave us with? Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. Can I talk about?
Oh yeah, give us what's the best way to get a hold of you, and
So
what do you have coming up new?
I have so much coming up. Tomorrow is the Enneagram discussion group, but you can reach me best at, it's very long, so longer than daveglaser.com, but it's connectingyouwithyourself.com, or you can Google Nancy Markow, Markow. I have all my events through a meetup, Connecting You With Yourself, and I have a little workbook.
I have my copy at home.
To learn the Enneagram. This workbook is constantly evolving because it's perfectly imperfect, and so this is a new version than what you have, and I'll probably be adding to it from the conference that I went to. But did I give you one of these?
No, let me take that.
See, that's a little meme that shares 3 questions that fit perfectly with both intentionally living in the Enneagram, because it's about the pause, and it's to remind you, take a breath, ask yourself, what are you thinking? And are your thoughts supporting you and what you want in life? What are you feeling? Same thing. Are you making up a story? Are you making up a story? And then what are you doing? And you love this as a personal trainer. You know, am I actually doing the work? And it's the same thing in the Enneagram.
Yep. Am I doing the work?
Am I doing the work?
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
That was fun.
That was so great. So great. Where are my keys?